Hello and welcome to Todd Talk, where insight meets inspiration. I'm your host, Todd Hiller, and I'm an author, speaker, and longtime community leader, here to guide you on a journey towards fulfillment and balance. In every episode, we'll explore ways to fill life's emptiness, helping you uncover practical tools to create harmony, purpose, and happiness. Whether it's thriving in your career, nurturing personal growth, or simply finding joy in the everyday, Todd Talk is your space for real conversations and actionable advice. So let's thrive together, personally, professionally, and beyond. This is Todd Talk, and I'm thrilled to have you here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Todd Talk. I want to say thank you for being here with me. Thank you for listening. Today is our 52nd episode, which marks one calendar year of recording. These come out weekly, Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're on episode 52, which means we are 52 weeks into the podcast, which started from scratch, like all things start. But, you know, I got thinking about the idea of one whole year of podcasts and 52 episodes in a row. And really some things kind of popped up at me because let's face it, my brain usually works that way. You know, it can't just see or hear a situation anymore. It wants to take it apart and talk about it. So here we go. Let's talk about it. So 1 year, 52 episodes, no skipped weeks, no grand master plan when I started, just a decision to start. And I want to remind everybody listening that if you feel stuck, if you feel behind, if you feel like you've quote unquote missed your window, you have not. There is so much power in realizing and recognizing that you have not missed your window. You're not behind. You can get there. You can start. You can put one foot down and say, today's the day, and just launch into something. One of the most beautiful things about being human is we can change our lives whenever we want to. We can choose to read different books, to listen to different music, to talk to different people, to pursue different ideas and different jobs, and surround ourselves with people we never have before, or keep surrounding ourselves with people who have brought us to better places and created better people out of us. So that's my encouragement for you as we start off today. You're not too late. You are not stuck. You are not behind. Just go ahead and start if you want to. You know, and a year ago, I didn't even know if anybody would ever listen to this. I had no idea, right? I just hit record. I uploaded it, and I did the things that the app was telling me to do. I made an intro and outro and put some background music behind it, and there we go. But I didn't know a year ago if anybody would listen. I just knew that I had something I wanted to say. And I've had something I've wanted to say for a long time now, and the more people I talk to, the more listeners I talk to, the feedback I get, and the people I work with on a coaching basis, from a coach platform, and the events I go to speak at, and the people I've worked with in my speaking workshops, it is so delightful when someone says to me, hey, we listened to your podcast. I love it. Thank you so much. Because quite frankly, 52 weeks ago, I didn't know if anybody was ever going to say that to me. I had no idea. And so the thing that pushed me to start was I've always liked to talk, right? And if you know me in person, you're probably smiling and chuckling, because if you know me in person, you absolutely know I like to talk. My mom always says I came out talking when I was born. So, but I've always liked to talk, and I've even more than talking, or even as much as talking, I've always loved to connect with people and to help them talk about things and pull apart things and discover and talk about different ideas, and not just simply stick to small talk. I love talking about ideas. I love pulling them apart and kind of looking at them and figuring out how I feel about them and what other people feel about them. And really, a podcast is a great platform to do that. And that's kind of what pushed me to start. But when I started, I had my doubts. My confidence level was, maybe mediocre at best. I believed in my ability to sit and record something meaningful on a microphone and push it out to the public. I wasn't doubting myself. But my confidence in how many people would listen to this was really kind of an unknown, because I had no basis. I had no previous experience with being a podcaster. So that's kind of where it started. And my energy level was good when I started. I remember saying, like, my first episode, I was like, oh my God, it's a real thing. It's out there in the world. And the folks that come to my TikTok live stream sort of like on the regular, I call them my OGs and my regulars, they were some of the ones too that pushed me to be like, you need to do this. Like, we would happily listen to this if you gave us 20 minutes or a half an hour a week of your thoughts like you do in the TikTok live, gosh, we would be so thankful for it, especially if we didn't have to wait for you to be live to go ahead and listen to it. So that's kind of where I was, and that's kind of where I started, and I just want to highlight the idea that, milestones don't always begin with clarity, right? Sometimes we just start. We just stick a shovel in the dirt and we say we want to dig a hole and build something, and then the next thing you know, there's a house there, 9 months later. The same thing was kind of true with this. I had the courage to start, but I had some uncertainty about how it would go, and I also had some uncertainty about how it would continue. I read something when I first started on the podcasting journey that the average podcast only lasts 4 episodes. And then people give up, or it dies, or they forget to record. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be the 4. I want to be the 24 or the 44. And now we're working out up to almost 54 with episode 52. So please know that the decision to start can be small. It is a big decision and a tough decision, because I've always said that starting is the hardest part and the first step is always the most difficult. And that is absolutely true. But in the grand scheme of the actual step, it's okay if it's small. When I launched my podcast with episode 1, there were no fireworks. There wasn't a big banner stretched across my garage door when I got home from work to say congratulations. There wasn't a parade. It was just a small, quiet moment where I said, hey, I have something to say. I want to get it down and share it with people who might want to listen to it. And off we went. And I think sometimes we assume that milestones come with those big fireworks and all that clarity. Yep, we knew exactly what to do. We planned for it for 6 months, and it went off without a hitch. Everything was perfect. And a lot of times that's not how life works. You have to take the courage. You have to take the uncertainty. You have to just be willing to start and put your foot forward and say, here we go. Let's figure out how we can do this. And, starting didn't necessarily all of a sudden reach the goal at the end. Episode 1 didn't equal episode 52. It didn't happen overnight, but it gave me the momentum to keep going. We've talked about that before too in an episode, that once you have momentum, once you get the ball rolling, so to speak, it's so much easier to keep it rolling and to keep yourself moving forward than it is to actually start. And that's the difficult part. So, starting definitely didn't fix anything overnight. It didn't create this mass giant 52 episode 1 year long podcast journey all overnight in one moment, but it gave me momentum to keep going. And here's something else I want to reflect on. Sometimes when it was time to record a podcast, there were times and there were days where I was like, well, what am I going to talk about today? And inspiration doesn't always exist in our lives, right? Sometimes you have to go looking for it. Sometimes you have to go show up and figure out what you want to say and how you want to phrase it and what you want to talk about, and do the work to get that taken on and sort of developed as we go forward. And sometimes life was super busy. Sometimes I had to run upstairs and lock myself in a room and tell my kids I'll be back downstairs soon. Hang with me. Give me 25 minutes. I got to bang this out quick because we got a busy weekend ahead. But so if you show up for yourself when no immediate payoff is visible, and if you learn that showing up for yourself now, good efforts now, best efforts now mean great life later and great achievements later, then you can come a really long way. And right now, speaking of when life gets busy, if you're hearing any wind in the background, I apologize. It is so windy and the rain is pounding outside as I record this. So hopefully the microphone takes care of the background noise. Fingers crossed that it does. If it doesn't, well, enjoy the rainstorm with me. But so when life gets busy and when you show up for yourself and for other people, even if the payoff isn't immediate, that means you are presenting yourself with the opportunity to trust the process. That was another episode title, right? All these things coming back to me, and I promise that wasn't planned. That was not in my notes to use that reference. But you're trusting the process that showing up for yourself and showing up for other people is going to go well and be a good thing. So when it comes to my podcast, people are like, well, what do you want to get out of this podcast? Well, one, I would love for it to take off and touch the lives of millions of listeners and just help people. Hanging out and talking with some super famous podcasters and being on their show or having them on mine would also be fantastic, but I'm not here for the glory of saying that I had celebrities come to talk to me, although they will someday. Don't worry. That day is coming. But, I've always just wanted to connect with listeners and give them some reassurance that real life is hard and difficult, but real life is also so beautiful if you know how to look at it and you know how to find the moments in it and make the most of every day. And so I've always just kind of hoped for that connection as I threw my voice out into the world on these podcast episodes. And I have gotten that back from people who listened in messages and in social media comments and in emails. And it's been really great. It's really touched my heart to say that, I've been able to help people because, gosh, I'm nothing if not a helper by nature. So I really love that idea of being able to be a helper for someone and to help someone with clarity or with burnout or with self-care or with personal wellness or with struggling with letting go or walking away from something or all the things we've talked about, And some of the past episodes I have found that really got the most follow-up from people, that people, reached out to me. One of the messages or one of the episodes I think that still sticks with me is when I posted an episode that talks about when something goes wrong, when something ends, it doesn't mean there is something wrong with you. It just means it was time for that thing to end. Not everything lasts forever. We have chapters of our lives. Not every person is in every chapter. Some people come and go. Some jobs and careers come and go. Some houses and places we live come and go. And just because something ended and just because something came to a close, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us or we did anything wrong. And when I launched that episode, I put it out there in the world, and probably a couple weeks later, I had follow-up from some people, and man, it taught me so much about so many things. And I love learning. That's something else I love. And I've always said that with all these podcast episodes, when I start making notes and I start just letting my voice kind of, fly and think on the fly as I record these, I have learned so many things, both in recording them and speaking them out loud and developing ideas as I go on the fly, but also with the follow-up from people who have come back to me and given me this really great reframing and this really great perspective of, hey, I listened to your episode, here's what it meant to me. And I think one of the most powerful and impactful messages after that episode was I had a guy say to me, I was married for a very short time and ended up divorced. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. And he said, I was in a really awful place and I listened to your podcast episode. He said, someone sent it to me and I happened upon it. And he said, it was the first time someone ever told me that it wasn't my fault that something ended. He said, everybody in my life, my ex-wife's family and even my own family and my friends, everybody told me that, hey, you screwed up. This was a really great match. It was supposed to last forever. It was marriage. It was supposed to be forever love. What happened? You screwed it up. It hasn't even been that long and your marriage is already over. And he said, I was in such a dark place because I had no one. He said, no one in my life had ever told me, ever. I had never heard the words that when something ends, it doesn't mean you have to point a finger of blame at someone. Sometimes things just end. The universe needs them to come to a close. And he said, after listening to your episode, he said, I felt like I could finally breathe and go outside and open my shades and kind of get back to living and being normal again, because he said, nobody ever told me that before. So that was such a powerful moment, and it taught me, I said before, I love learning things. The thing it taught me was that sometimes the things we as people think are commonplace ideas, or the things we think are general knowledge, or things that we think of as second nature that we always know and always come to mind, sometimes that's not the case for everybody else. And you can bring such beautiful things to people if you just find some common ground and give them some thoughts and some heartfelt feelings of the things that are on your mind and in your brain and push that out into the world. And so I've been so blessed to be able to do that. And it's been so exciting to have you all along for the journey on the ride. I remember getting a little badge on the podcasting app for congratulations, you've published 10 episodes. And that one, I got the little follow-up like, hey, most podcasts fail after 4. You've published 10, keep going. And then I got one at 20 and 25 and then 35. And then I got one at 50, and along the way I got a notification when I had reached 1,000 listens along the way, whatever episode that was. But hey, by the way, this episode marks when more than 1,000 people had listened. So it was really kind of cool to have all those things develop and happen. And Thinking about the audience and the episodes too, some episodes were for the audience. Some were for me. And some were for both. And I didn't realize that until later on. But, some episodes were a way for me to process some things and share my story with people. I talked a lot about an episode about walking away from things that no longer serve us. And I shared a very personal story with me about my experience with the fire department. I had been there for 26 years and what the decision and the actual walk looked like to leave and to be forced out of something I had known and loved for 2.5 decades, more than half of my life thus far. So, yeah, some were for the audience, some were for me, and some, I didn't realize until later, like I said, were for both, were for everybody. And if you want to go back and find that episode, if you're struggling with change or with letting go of something, with walking away, there's a lot in that one. There's a lot in that episode about leaving and walking away from things that no longer serve us that I think could really resonate and help with a lot of folks. So if you want to grab that one, you certainly can. And also, we talk a lot too, or I talk a lot too, about how I want you to just keep going and to keep your forward momentum going and to just keep showing up for yourself. And those small steps that we take, I started doing 1 episode a week. Sundays at 6, the episodes release. And I said, well, hopefully I'll get to 4. And then I made past 4 and I got to 10 and 20 and off to the races we went, 30, 40 and onward. But those things happen in little steps. It was just 1 episode a week. And so those little steps, right? Those little small steps and small increments that we take forward, they create the identity that we develop and build for ourselves. 52 episodes ago, 52 weeks ago, I was just a guy who thought about starting a podcast. I wasn't one who had a podcast, and I have created an identity around myself, that I said I am now a podcaster. Before I had my first public speaking gig, I was just someone who was thinking about speaking. Before I had my first coaching client, I was just someone who hoped someday maybe I could help someone from a coaching platform. But those small steps help create the identity of who you are. And, when it comes to the podcast, it's not just about 52 episodes that I made. I have realized that I became someone who showed up for myself and for my listeners on a weekly basis. And I think that's something really beautiful when we look at ourselves and recognize that. And I think people listening, so many of you do that right now without even realizing it. So I want to encourage you to go ahead and think about that right now. Who do you show up for every day, every week, every month consistently? I bet you there's a long list of people who you're like, oh my God, yep, I always want to help them with this. I always want to talk to them about that. I always want to be here for this event or this occasion. Yeah, I love doing this with this person. And celebrate that about yourselves. Be really happy and really thankful, because that's a beautiful thing to do, to serve other people and to be consistent and to create that sense of, of commitment to show up for them and for yourself. And that can carry us through lots of different things. That connects to our health. It connects to relationships. It connects to recovering from burnout, right? Creative pursuits. All those things, those little steps we take towards each one of those goals I just mentioned, eventually with some consistency and some time, you can make some really profound shifts and you can get some really great progress and you can conquer some really great things and climb some really hard hills, tackle the mountain and scurry up the sheer face and get yourself where you want to go and get to the peak and the top and ring the bell, or whatever analogy and euphemism you want to use. But there's so much that happens when we show up with those small steps consistently. If you work on your health every single week, you say every week I want to walk at least 5 miles. Every week I want to walk at least 10 miles. Every week I want to lift at least 2 days a week. I want to do some push-ups every day, whatever it is. I want to eat better. I only want to have dessert after I eat dinner twice a week. Whatever it is, if you take that little step and you do that consistently over and over again, you can keep showing up for yourself and you can improve your health. Relationships are the same. If there's something in your relationship you want to work on, hey, you know what, my spouse and I, or my significant other and I really struggle with finding time to talk about, whatever it is. We're going to set time aside 2-3 days a week and we're going to talk about it. If you are always struggling at work because you never have a chance to follow up with your boss about the things that are stressing you out about work and you need that check-in, those little things, if you do them over and over again with consistency, add up to great leaps in whatever you're trying to improve, your health, your relationship. And this too, when it comes to things like, you guys know I speak about burnout and burnout recovery and personal wellness. One of the things that you have to remember and give yourself permission to do is use the small steps to build bigger moments. You can't expect to snap your fingers and just recover all in one step. You have to work your way up. You have to count the small wins and count the small victories and be proud of those and celebrate those in your own small way and let them add up to bigger and better things. And that's something that you can start to say, oh my gosh, I can see the change now, and now I can feel it, and it's becoming so visible and so noticeable. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's not overwhelming all at once, right? We don't get to snap our fingers or flip a switch and say, hey, look at this. I went from point A to point W, all with one flick of the wrist of my magic wand. You can celebrate that. Look how far I've come. You have to just show up consistently. And then two things happen. One, when you look back on how far you've come, then you can really celebrate the big milestones and the giant progress you've made and say, wow, look at how far I've come. Look at all the things I've done. And it also gives you perspective to say, well, even though I didn't think that this was going to actually pay off, even though I just kind of put my head down and did it, you can be happily surprised and say, look what it did. Look what I did for myself. Look what I did for my relationship, my health, my burnout recovery, my creative pursuits. Look at what I've done for myself as a person by being consistent and showing up time and time again for myself and for the other people in my life. And we're approaching 2026. 2025 is coming to a close. This episode will release right before Christmas. And so I want you to remember, you do not need a life overhaul. You need a repeatable step. I think a lot of times we fall into, especially around New Year's, we fall into I got to overhaul my life. I'm going to throw out everything I own and start from scratch, and here we go, and it's going to be great. I'm going to build from the ground up. But you don't need to do that. Your life doesn't need a complete makeover. There are beautiful things about your life that should stay. There are beautiful things about you as a person that should stay and need to stay. But if you have a repeatable step that you can put in practice to perform a certain function and improve a certain aspect of your life, then you can carry that and improve whatever you want to improve. So use that repeatable step and keep right on going. And now, as we close, as I wrap this up, my friends, I want to invite you to consider a couple things. Think about what's one thing you could start, especially if it's something you've always wanted to start. I always wanted to start a podcast, and finally one day I got my booty in gear and started one, right? So what's one thing you could start? And then think about what's one thing you could keep doing that you know you're doing well and is doing well for you. What consistent thing are you doing, and can you keep doing that will keep taking you down that positive road and lead to positive change? And then I want you to think about what would change in a year if you didn't quit. Because so many of us we smash ourselves up against the wall of difficult, right? If you say, I want to do 20 push-ups a day every single day for an entire calendar year, round about day 11, when you miss the day, and you get to day 12, and you're like, I got to do my push-ups, and you're like, I'll do them tomorrow. And then you don't do them, and day 13, 14, 15 go by, and then 16, 20, the next thing you know, it's been 6 weeks before you've done it, and you're like, well, I can't make any progress now, so I might as well give up. But think about what would change if you didn't quit. What would change if on day 12, when you said, well, I missed those push-ups, but on day 13, you got right back to them and then kept up with them? What would happen if you journaled every day and stayed consistent for a year? What would happen if you ate better, or you ate cleaner, or you set yourself a goal for eating? What would happen if you went for a walk every day? What would happen if you found time to call your best friend throughout the course of a year? What would change in a year if you didn't quit those weekly phone calls to your best friend? What would change in a year if you stuck with going to therapy or talking to a coach or talking to your best friend? What would change if you spent time working on the relationships in your life that you wanted to repair or better? Think about what beautiful things would happen if you stayed consistent for an entire year. And in the realm of this episode, it's 52 podcast episodes that are out there in the world for people to listen to. It's connections I've made with people. It's made me a better speaker, a better podcaster. It's taught me more about my recorded voice. It's taught me more about breathing, about pacing. It's taught me more about technology, about the different apps I can use to record and the way I can download them and get them out in the world. It has taught me so much, and there have been so many wonderful changes that have come about just because I didn't quit and I decided that showing up every week was something I wanted to do. And I know you can do this for yourselves. I know you can. I know there are things in your life that you can keep doing that will bring about palpable, wonderful, beautiful change. And I want to encourage you to do that, and I want to cheer so loud for you while you do it. My friends, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you listen and let me into your ears every week on this podcast. It really, I promise it is not lost on me. I promise I am so grateful and so thankful, and it means the absolute world to me to have you along with me on this journey. If you have found something in this episode that's been helpful, let me know. Send me a comment on social media. Send me an email. Come follow me on social media, TikTok and Instagram. It is the username Todd W. Hiller. They're all the same across TikTok and Instagram with the same username. I also have a chat channel on Instagram you can join if you'd like to. I'll send you daily motivational stuff like this to make your weeks, make sure you can smile and move forward with some consistency and some good progress, and also keep yourself smiling along the way. And if you ever need a speaker for an event, you need coaching services, you can reach out to me either via email or on social media. I would love to talk to you about it. It is my true belief that we as people were meant to help other people in this world. And I take my helping other people really seriously, and it brings me so much joy to do so. I thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your day, no matter where you are, no matter what time it is, no matter what part of the world you live in or are currently staying in. I wish you all the best, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season. Be well.
Thanks for tuning in to Todd Talk. If you've liked what you've heard, please go ahead and subscribe and follow along so you don't miss any updates or new episodes. Thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day.